Hello, everyone. I am Kris O'Connor, and I am with Fat Gems Boutique. And I have a new business or a little side thing that I'm doing. It's called Quilt Blocks of Comfort. And I have a guest here today on our podcast from South Texas. I'm in North Texas on a cold, blustery day. I'm very excited. I've met Alicia, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe 5 years ago. I don't even remember. It's been a long time. And we used to work together for Google Business Profile, of all things.
Uh,
And we had a great time. And she's off into a new adventure. And I don't even know if that's really the right words, but please let me introduce you to Alicia Maples. And we're going to talk a little bit about glass children. So, Alicia, tell us about yourself.
God, thanks for having me on, Kris. It's so good to see you. Sure. So 14 years ago, I did a TEDx talk, which was an 18.5 minute snippet of my life. And in that TEDx talk, I talked about glass children and what that means. And about a year ago, Gen Z picked up that TEDx talk and it went viral on TikTok. And so the term glass child, conversations about glass children, podcast topics about glass children, it's happening more all over the world. And that makes me really excited.
Wow. Interesting. Viral, huh? On TikTok.
It did.
Who knew? Who knew? All right. So, can you tell me, explain what it means to be a glass child and how this term resonates with experiences experiences of with so many different siblings, and
Mhm.
just kind of let's dive into it a little bit.
Okay, sure. So, a glass child is a person who has a sibling who has one of three issues going on, or maybe all three at the same time. They have a cognitive disability, they have a physical disability, and or they have some kind of a serious illness or a chronic illness, some kind of a medical condition that's going on. And what happens is in those, I call that a high needs sibling. In high needs families, the issues of that high needs sibling are so severe that the parent's attention is just consumed by the high needs child. And they don't have time or bandwidth to pay attention to the other children that are in the household, like to really see them and what they're going through and what they need. And the message that I always give to parents is your other children are seeing everything that's going on in the household, except with the coping skills of a child. So they have very deep needs, not just normal childlike needs, but even deeper needs, because oftentimes what they're witnessing is trauma in the home. So the parents don't see their other children. They are called glass children, not because we're fragile. We're actually very strong. We had to learn to be strong to survive the things that we went through. We're called glass children because our parents see through us as though we're made of glass.
Wow. Wow. That's so impactful. Um,
Mhm.
just the simple nurturing that kids need, I can see where that could be very hurtful. Not understanding. We talked a little bit about the things that I had epiphany on. So I even though I didn't wasn't raised with any of that, there are some similarities into what we were talking
Yeah.
about a little while ago. And I can't imagine how so expand on that a little
Hmm.
bit. What tell us about what drew you to this topic. I mean, I know, but let's share it with our listeners and how has it shaped your perspective on the family dynamics?
I never wanted to talk about this. It was not something that I ever aspired to do, and in fact, I never even thought that I had a story to share, Kris. What happened was 14 years ago, TEDx came to San Antonio, Texas, and many of my friends were telling me, Alicia, you need to speak. You're such a good speaker. You need to speak. And I thought, TED is all about like innovation and new. And at that time, I was a business coach. So, really, there's nothing new in the business coaching world, especially now, but even back then. And then I had a friend who said to me, Alicia, what you need to talk about is your story. You need to help the world understand what it's like to be a healthy sibling in a family that's in crises. And I was like, hmm. And I thought about it and I prayed about it and I felt like it was something that I was supposed to do. So I applied to speak. And to my shock, they said yes. And there I was on a stage telling really deeply personal stories about things that I went through as a kid. I was terrified. And the night before, I remember saying, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm crazy. I should never have signed up for this. And I'm just going to politely cancel. And of course, I didn't. Um, the impact of that from that day, even to today, I'm very thankful that God gave me the courage to tell my story because it's impacted so many lives, and that's what I want to do with my life is help others who have been in the situation that I'm in. So that's my mission now. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Excuse me. I am so glad that you did that. And I'm glad that you didn't listen to your inner voice telling you to not do it.
Mhm.
Because I think that, there are so many things in the world that we just don't talk about.
Mhm.
And if you don't talk about it, if you don't learn how to deal with it, if you don't learn how to move through it, around it, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, right? Then I think it stays stuck with you for the rest of your life. It can absolutely affect your life. And I think it's important for people to understand that we have to work through these things in order to have a freeing, better life. Does that make sense?
You're 100% spot on, Kris. That is true for any kind of trauma that we go through. And the only thing that I'm qualified to speak on in that regard is what happens with glass children, because the consequences of a lack of intervention in adulthood are severe. So, part of what you have to remember, this is a child who is in a crisis situation, a crisis family. There is trauma that's happening. If there's a medical condition that's going on, I've spoken to adults who, as children, were responsible for putting oxygen masks on their brothers or sisters, responsible. One young lady told me that starting at the age of 13, she was responsible for giving her brother medication. And this is life saving medication. Um, Brothers and sisters who, because of cognitive disorders, were beaten up by their siblings and were told by their parents, he or she doesn't mean to hurt you. It's just kind of forgive them and move on, and would continually get beaten up, physically abused. So these are really serious things. And what happens is we are trained as children that our needs, our feelings are not only not important, they're less important than anybody else around us. We're trained that our job is to take care of everybody else, their physical needs, medical needs, in the case of a medical diagnosis, but also the emotional needs of everyone. I can't tell you how many times I was told I have a brother who was born with a terminal illness. He lived to be 4.5. He was in the hospital 10 times in his short life. And then I have another brother who has profound nonverbal autism and had a lot of the typical kind of characteristics of head banging and punching walls and breaking things and things like that. That's what I grew up with. So we're conditioned that it is our feelings are not important and that we're supposed to take care of everybody else, particularly everybody else's emotions. I was constantly being told by other people outside my family, do everything I can to make my parents happy. So then perfectionism sets in. Like, I need to be the good child. I need to be the perfect child, not cause any problems.
Yeah.
All of these things are too much pressure for an adult, much less for a child who is still growing and trying to understand the world and who they are.
Yeah.
When there is not intervention, so to your earlier point, when there is not intervention for that child, we take that programming into adulthood. So, for example, one of the common shared experiences, and Kris, let me just say, this is common across generations, across cultures, across countries. It's really incredible how universal these themes are. So one of them is, unless we're perfect, we're not valuable.
Oh, ouch.
So there's this high drive to perform and to perform perfectly. So there's a lot of anxiety and depression because we can't be perfect, right? And so when we
No.
fail, which we're going to do, that's not just I failed in this thing, that turns into I am a failure. The second thing that is common is because we were trained that our job is supposed to take care of other people and that our value is based on how well we take care of other people, we lean into relationships where the other person needs to be taken care of. And most often, that other person, like who we are attracted to as we become young adults and older, are toxic people. The help that they need isn't just like normal help, it is, I'm an addict. So they need help with addiction, or they're extremely codependent. And so they need help with that. Or they're narcissistic and abusers. There's a lot of domestic violence that is associated with adult glass children and their relationships. Pardon me. So without intervention, what happens to this child as they grow into adulthood is they get caught up in the same cycle, except as adults. It leads to a lot of suicidal ideation, terrible problems.
It's interesting. Now, I wasn't, I'm not a glass child, but my father was very ill when I was just approaching my senior year in high school.
Mm.
And he had liver cancer. And,
Okay.
my, I mean, he was at home because that was his wishes. So my mother put me in charge of taking care of my father.
Wow.
And that was very hard at 17 years old, right?
Kris.
And it came a point where, we had to walk him into the bathroom and give him a bath, and because he liked soaking in warm water because it made him feel
Right.
comfortable. And it was very difficult for me because I'm the daughter,
That's right.
and like I am being put in this position, and I was expected. Now my brothers weren't expected, but I was expected. And to do this, and it came to the point where my dad was getting worse, and so my mother had hired a nurse to come in to show her to give him morphine, give him shots of morphine.
Pain.
And she wanted me to do that, and I refused. I refused. I was like, I drew the
Good
line.
for
I'm
you.
like, I'm sorry. I'm the daughter here. I don't want on my conscience that I killed my dad,
Yeah.
even though realistically, I know I wasn't. I was giving him comfort. But in my mind at 17,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. So I refused to do that. And my mother continued to do it. But I can relate with a glass child with
Yeah.
that experience.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me for obviously my whole
Your whole
life.
life. That's called parentification. What your mother asked you to do is called parentification, and this happens with glass children all the time. Parentification is when a child, and at 17, a 17-year-old would say, I'm not a child. Yes, a 17-year-old is a child. It's
Mhm.
giving a child responsibilities that should only be handled by an adult. And yeah, it can have devastating consequences to the psyche.
Yeah, it definitely did.
I'm
It
proud of
definitely
you for
did. I mean,
saying no.
I moved through a lot of, all that time. But it was a lot of work to get through all that stuff. And I think that obviously me telling you the biggest impact was when it was time to, give my dad the shots to make him so he wasn't in so much pain. And and that's hard to watch too, because this
Yeah,
person who was your father is
yeah,
now you don't even recognize who this person
it
is
is.
because they're
Yeah,
floating somewhere, doing something. So I almost hate to say this, but the blessing was the day that he passed,
yeah,
and that he was out of his misery, and then we could try to get back together
yeah.
as a family. So I can relate in a way to that, but I was raised with that. So with that being said, how do glass children build strength and resilience? And what can we learn from their experiences?
It's a good question. When I'm working with glass children who are adults, the first thing that I tell them is get into counseling. They need professional assistance to understand what they've been through, to recognize it for what it was, which is trauma and abuse, and to process through it.
Mm,
So that's one thing that I always suggest. Oftentimes, Kris, when I'm working with adult glass children, it's the first time that they have felt seen about their own childhood experiences. I facilitated a workshop a year and a half ago, I guess now, and everyone who was there said it was the first time they ever saw their life in black and white on a screen and were able to recognize it as trauma and abuse. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this is almost for some kind of a daily ritual, I can tell you as I'm going through my own healing from this, it's still something that I have to work on, which is acknowledging my own emotions and affirming to myself that my emotions are okay. It's okay for me to have feelings. Like, I always know it's okay for me to have happy feelings and joyful feelings and helpful feelings. But when I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling sad, there's this whole conversation that I have to have with myself. Like, am I allowed to feel this way? Okay, maybe I'm allowed to feel this way. Am I allowed to express this emotion? I'm not sure if I am or not. And so that's where somebody who's a licensed therapist can be really helpful. so that the adult glass child understands, yeah, you have rights to these emotions and it's okay for you to express these emotions. And you don't have to put everybody else's feelings above your own.
Yeah.
That's the second. The third that I would say is surround yourself with healthy people who support you and love you exactly as you are. As an adult goes through this healing process, you begin to identify who the people are in your life who are not healthy. It's really easy for us to be taken advantage of because we don't see, right? We don't see that there's an issue. Our job is to be helpful and all that. So you begin to understand who the people are in your life, whether it's at work or in family or socially, that are unhelpful and are toxic and who are reinforcing these negative beliefs that you have.
Yeah.
And so you want to step out of those relationships, set clear boundaries, and find a group of people who love you and support you as you are.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say that's definitely a tough one, I think, for a lot of people. I am finally, after the last year or so, realizing the toxic people that I've been around. And I have begun to step away from or out of earshot or whatever the case may be. Now, sometimes you cannot like 100% remove them because they're going to be part of your life with your circle or whatever the case may be. But I think stepping back and away and around them has really helped me quite a bit. I don't have to be ugly to them. I don't have to do any of that. I just have to know that where my boundaries are and live with those boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to use those boundaries. Worthiness comes to mind, right?
Yeah.
And we beat up ourselves so much that, we have to be a perfectionist and we're not good enough. And everybody tells us we're not good enough. So we believe that we're not good enough. But honest to God, we are. We have everything that we need inside of us. We have to start believing that we have that.
That's right.
And I think that's probably the hardest step, whether it's glass children, whether it's narcissism, or whether it's whatever it is. I think that's the hardest part for, as an individual, to have enough courage. Is that the right word? To have enough courage to stand up for yourself and let go of all the ugliness or around you. Is that a good way to put that?
I think it's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. It's it's very challenging, and the healing process for glass children who are adults, it's not a linear thing, and that drives me crazy because I'm very much a here's point A, here's point B, and here are the steps to get here, and it's like just I tell my counselor, "All right, just give me the checklist. What do I have to do so that I can be healed?" And of course, he laughs, and then I laugh. Um, I'm doing this work, right? I'm doing this work all the time. I'm talking all the time about it. And last year, 2024, I gained 19 pounds because through doing this work and doing the healing, I had more memories that surfaced. I had more knowledge come to me that was unwelcome but needed so that I could heal. And I had been on this massive fitness journey and doing all these things. And God showed me there was a lot that I needed to heal from. And I broke at one point and I gained a bunch of weight. So I'm sharing that because I want people to understand as you're going through this journey of healing, it's not a linear thing. It's a lot like grief. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and you're going to feel really strong, and then you're going to feel like you're in the pits. But it's just temporary. It's not permanent. And even though it doesn't feel like at times you're making positive steps, you really are. You're moving forward in taking care of yourself, which is something that is huge for glass children because we've been told and trained that we're just not as important as everyone else.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that, and I know that's difficult because I've been on a crazy road these last 4 or 5 years,
Mhm.
and it's been up, it's been down, it's been in between, it's been like down in the dumps, like you know. So I understand the roller coaster of life, but when you believe in yourself and know that you can move through this, and if you get help, if that's what you need with a counselor. Now, I would caution to say that not every counselor will be great for this because I think some counselors are. I've been to counselors that are just so generic that I ended up not staying because,
Yeah.
like, you're not hearing me. You're not hearing what I'm saying, and
Uh,
you're not helping me. You're actually making things worse.
Worse. Yes.
And so I think that if you choose, don't be ashamed of it. We all, at some time in our life, need some type of help.
Mhm.
Do not turn to family members. Turn to a professional that
Yes.
understands, has not necessarily gone through it themselves, but understands the processes, understands what it is, what a glass child is, or children, and I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? I firmly believe that not every person out there, psychiatrist, psychologist, can help every person.
Agreed. Agree. I'm so glad that you're saying this, Kris. Uh, Baseline, you have to find someone who is trauma informed. So, a trauma based therapist, trauma based clinician. That's what you're looking for. And if they have a background in working with childhood trauma, even better because they're going to understand how that trauma has helped shape and mold you and your behaviors into adulthood, which is where you are and what you're trying to work on to get better in. So yeah, it's got to be somebody who's trauma based, and if they have that experience in childhood trauma, that's even better. And one of the suggestions that I make to adult glass children is because a lot of therapists do not understand the glass child experience or they haven't heard of it, is when you are meeting with your counselor, take or send them my TEDx talk because that tells the story. It's very revealing, and it's been helpful.
That's a great idea. I watched the TEDx talk. It was phenomenal. I mean, it was very informative and just it made so much sense to me. And I totally understand and have empathy for glass children who have gone through that. When I was 16, I took care of somebody that was a special needs. It was hard, and they had 4 children. So I can imagine, I don't know for sure, they were raised the same way as you were, or similar, right? And so I know I didn't last long in that situation because it was
Mhm.
too hard to take care of this individual. I didn't have the mental bandwidth or the experience or what I needed to do, even just to sit with them for a couple hours. And I realized I was helping the parents so they could get a breather, right? But I was not equipped. I was not equipped one iota. So I got lasted like 2 or 3 times, and I said, I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. So I can't imagine what it would have been like living in that family. So I have started something new called Quilt Blocks of Comfort. And I have fabric that I sell for quilters. And it came to me at the end of last year that I want to start this new program.
I love it.
And I want people to send me their quilt blocks, and it doesn't matter what they are. I honestly don't care. And ones that you have started and haven't finished, but as long as they're a block, size doesn't matter. They could be small, they could be big. And I want people to mail them to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these blocks together and create a quilt.
Mm.
I've talked to a few of my friends about this, and I've got one who said that she's on board, that she's going to do all the quilting for me, which is huge. If you're in the quilting world, you understand how big that is.
It's
And then
amazing.
I have another person who has lots of remnants and different things that she wants to give me for like quilt backs and so on and so forth. So 2025, I want to put these quilts together, and they're not going to be large ones. They're going to be ones that can come around your shoulders. What does quilt blocks of comfort mean? It means that when you're in time of stress, that when we put a blanket around us, what does that make you feel like? You feel
Yeah.
warm, you feel comforted, you feel whatever that emotion is, right?
Yeah.
And so my goal for 2025 is to, and I don't even know how this is all going to produce, but I have the Lord walking me through all of this, and He will bring it all to me. He's already started. And so I want to give them to fire departments, police departments, different, hospitals, and maybe I give it to uh, trauma psychologists, psychiatrists. I don't know who I'm going to be giving these to, so people can be wrapped in warmth and comfort. Now, that being said, quilts can be a metaphor for the patchwork of life's challenges and triumphs.
Yeah.
How do you see this connecting to the lives of glass children? How do you wrap, that comfort around a glass child?
Hmm. First, let me say, I think what you're doing is amazing. I can't wait to talk to you at the end of the year and see how that worked out. It's a beautiful thing, Kris. Um, what little glass children need, it's so simple. They need to be seen. So typically, when a high needs family, let's say, walks into church, everybody asks, "How are you doing?" to the parents, then asks about the high needs child. How is he or she doing? And there's not much that's even said or acknowledged about the okay child, the glass child. So if you know a high needs family in your neighborhood, in social circles, soccer, sports, school, church, wherever, the comfort is for you to go speak to that glass child. See them, ask them how they are, talk to them about what's happening in their lives. If you're in a mentoring position, like a teacher or a coach or something like that, developing trust with them so that they can share safely, feel safe to share with you what they're dealing with and what they're going through. But being seen and affirmed, that's one way to give comfort. Another is to reinforce to them that perfectionism is unrealistic, that failure is okay, and most importantly, that their value doesn't come from what they do or how well they perform. Their value comes from the fact that God created them and loves them, and they are beautiful and unique and loved by God, no matter what. So breaking some of those false belief systems that they have. God, there's so much power in that, so much comfort in that. And it's simple. It doesn't require money. It requires just a little bit of time and some words and attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are two ways that I would say you can really provide comfort. The third one that comes to my mind, because high needs families need help. I'm not here to demonize parents. I understand how difficult this is. I saw what my parents went through. So that's not what I'm trying to do, is demonize parents. I'm just telling the fact. The third thing is invite the glass child to your home. I can't tell you how comforting it was to get out of this constant crisis. It was 24/7 with my brother Mario with autism, and then my brother David, who was dying. It never stopped. And for family members or friends to invite me to their house, even just for a meal, because mealtime at my house as a child was not normal. We had Mario, who was like taking food off of everybody's plates. It was just very stressful. So even to go over to somebody else's house for a meal and to sit there and watch people who were laughing and having regular conversations, and food wasn't flying around in the air. I mean, it was just shocking and welcoming. And the times that I got to spend the night at someone's house and just be taken away from the drama and the crying and the sickness, and it was a gift. It was a gift. So that would be a third thing I would say is a way to
I
give
mean,
them.
I can see that. I can absolutely see that. They being invited over would be like, and I won't call it normal, but it's more
It
normal
is.
than what you're dealing with. And I get to see a different perspective that what you're in doesn't mean that's what life is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it gives a child a different perspective and maybe some hope that someday life will be a little bit easier, life will be a little less stressful, life will be whatever you want
Yeah.
it to be.
And that's the quilt, Kris. That's the metaphorical blanket that you're wrapping around a glass child, is to do those things. The only other thing that I would add to it, Kris, is to say be patient with the glass child. We don't always react well to normalcy because it's very strange to us. And it may take time for that glass child to open up or to even behave normally because they're not sure how they're supposed to act or how they're supposed to behave. So you can be patient.
And I think trust is a big word. It's scary to put yourself out there. It's scary to step out of that zone. It's scary to step in something you have no idea what's
Mhm.
going to happen. It's the fear of the unknown, right?
Yep.
And usually, not always, but usually when somebody does that, it is better for them.
Mhm.
But it's hard for us to see that because we are very visual individuals living here, and it's hard for people to step outside of that comfort zone
Mhm.
and realize that there is more, there is better, there is nicer, there is easier, there is peace, there's joy,
Right.
but I think that's hard for a lot of people
Mhm.
to do that. So what small actions can listeners take to recognize and uplift the glass children in their lives or communities?
So I think we talked about the actions. Let's talk about how do you recognize a glass child. So I have yet to meet, I'm not saying they're not out there, but I have yet to meet someone who grew up in a high needs family who is not a glass child, who did not have these experiences. So know that if you know of a family that has a high needs child and there are brothers or sisters that are in that family, that they need exactly what we talked about. They need to be seen. They need to be reminded of where their value comes from. They need to be reminded that they don't have to be perfect, and they need to be invited into situations outside of the family so they can experience some respite.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have one last question for you, Alicia. If you could gift every last child one thing, a quilt, a story, or a message, what would it be and why?
Could you come up with a harder question? Wow. Oh man.
Go with your gut. What did your gut immediately tell you?
Okay. I would want to wrap my arms around every glass child and just hug them, tell them that I see them, and tell them it's not your job.
What a great message. What a great message. I think that's a great message. So, with that being said, usually as we sit and talk about glass children and quilts of comfort and how do we comfort glass children and so on and so forth, sometimes there is always one thing that popped into your head that you should have said, that you felt you should have said. Do you have anything that you want to put up there before we end today?
Mm. Usually there is, Kris. But this time, no, there isn't anything that's coming to my mind other than if you are an adult glass child and you're watching this, I want you to know that you're not alone. There is a world of us out here, and you can find support. I have a website that has free resources. It's called ICSEE, glasschildren.com. If you are a counselor or a therapist watching this, please also go to the website because there's a lot of details there that will help explain the glass child experience that will help you be more effective in your practice. Clergy,
Mhm.
please pay attention to this message because one of the things that happens is spiritual dissociation, where we get really confused about who God is and how he feels about us. And you, as a minister, you have an opportunity to have a massive impact in that area. And parents, I would say, do the best that you can to remind your child that you love them unconditionally. I guess I did have something to say.
Yes, you did. You did. You absolutely did. So repeat your website again. I think you said ICSEE glasschildren.com.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'd highly reach out to that website. I'd reach out to Alicia if you're
Yeah.
challenged or struggling or want some answers. That's what her website's all about.
Yeah.
And I am really excited to have you on today.
Thank you.
It's 2025. It's the beginning. I
It
can't even
is.
imagine where you're going this year with this. message to people to help them understand that they're okay and to live a better life and get away from that perfectionism and all the things that have entered into their life. So we'll have to reconvene at the end of
Let
2025 and
let's
compare
do
notes
it. Yes, let's
and
do it. I want to
have
hear all
another
about.
podcast. And so we can kind of see how each one of us has grown and where the Lord has taken us to get where we need to get to. And I don't know that we ever arrive, but we have a destination and we keep going. But I'm excited. Thank you so much, Elisa, for being here today. And we will connect soon.
Thank you for being willing to give this topic more exposure. And it's so good to see you.
It's great to see you too. All right, everybody, until next time, you're loved, you're wanted, and we are so grateful that came today. Talk to you soon.
Bye.